What's up, everyone? It's Andrew Nemani, your host of Permission to Shine podcast, where we highlight the most humble, inspiring personal stories. I am so stoked for today's episode. This guest has worked with President Barack Obama in the Oval Office, Jay-Z, Mr. Untouchable himself, Tom Cruise when he was at his peak, Denzel Washington. The list goes on and on. This incredible individual had a career at GQ spanning 40 years. Imagine the legendary stories you guys are about to hear. He's now working with people like Roger Federer and the iconic designer Todd Snyder, who's originally from Iowa but now based out of New York. I think two things that'll really stand out today. Hard work and humility are two things that Jim Moore stands upon and that have allowed him to be so successful. Growing up in Minnesota, having aspirations to move to New York City, to make it big, and that's exactly what he did. I'm so excited for you guys to hear it. Two quick things before we jump into the episode. One, a huge shout out to my mom. She was in New York City at the time of the recording. She's truly done so much and been such a supporter of this podcast, and I'm so grateful that she had the opportunity to sit in on the recording. I love you, Mom. Shout out to you. Thank you for everything. Secondly, I am ever committed to bringing you guys the best stories that I can find in the world, right? Humble, inspiring stories are what I want to bring to you guys. In order to continue to do that, to continue to bring people like Jim Moore, like Dr. Sanjeev Chopra, like Ben Freeberg, I need your support. Please hit the follow button on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on YouTube, on Instagram, wherever you subscribe to content. Please follow Permission to Shine podcast. It will only help me and my commitment to you. All right, that's enough. Without further ado, please enjoy this legendary conversation with Jim Moore.
How do you define what you did for 40 years at GQ?
How do I define it? I was probably a couple years into my schooling in New York. I moved here from St. Paul, Minnesota. And I remember one day saying, how did I get here? What gave me the gumption? Do you know that word gumption?
No, but I love it.
Mom, do you know gumption? Okay. Gusto. Good definition for gumption. Gumption is a word probably not used that much anymore.
We're bringing it back.
I'm showing my age. We can just look at me, but
I'm bringing sexy back, and you're bringing gumption back.
Gumption back. Not a very sexy word, but it does show that you have, some gusto, and it does show you that you have some drive. And I think vocationally, I kind of always knew what I wanted to do, even though everyone was kind of trying to push me into. They knew I was a creative person, but everybody wanted me to be a painter and do something in the fine arts. And I explored that a little bit after high school, but I really felt that my true love ever since I was a very young boy was magazines, and specifically fashion magazines. And I like things, I'm a child of the 70s, so as I grew up watching all those kind of really glamorous movies and, seeing the fashion magazines and what they looked like. And I was just really intrigued with, the pictures and how glamorous they were. And I wanted to be somehow involved in the process. And I didn't know, they didn't call them stylists then, they were fashion editors, and they still call them fashion editors. But I didn't know what the job was, but I knew that I wanted to be on that set and I wanted to help that girl or that boy look their best. And I wanted to be by the photographer, or maybe I wanted to be taking the pictures. I don't know, but I wanted something to do with, images. And for a minute, I thought I could do it in the Twin Cities, but I learned pretty quickly that the whole fashion industry does not exist in America outside of New York for the most part. That's changed a little bit, but so I kind of hightailed it to New York. But I think with anything like that, sometimes you do kind of look in the rearview mirror a couple of years into it, and you're like, oh wow, I really had the gumption to do that. I really have the desire to do that. I really must have had a burning, desire to get myself on a plane and get there. So I'm very thankful of that. I'm very thankful that I had parents that supported it and said, there's a quote in the back of my book from my mom, which is basically, she was the person who said, get the heck out of here. She's like, go follow your dreams. Your aspirations are too big for this little town. So, I think it really killed her inside, because she knew once I was on a plane, she'd see me again, but I would never be living in her town again. So that probably was a little bit hard for her, but she knew what was best for me. So she just kind of pushed me to do it. So that was a big factor. And then once I got to New York, it was like, wow, you remember that first time your foot hit the sidewalk?
I was addicted.
Yeah.
I remember sitting in the Starbucks at the time.
Okay.
And just sitting in the window. And
where were you?
I was like Midtown, I think.
Okay.
I was probably 14 at the time.
Wow.
And I remember being in the hotel room, like begging my parents, being like, please let me go out on my own. I just want to be by myself in New York. I'll just go across the street to the Starbucks.
Yes.
I just want to sit there. And like I pounded my foot. They're like, no, you're not going. And I'm like, I'm going. And I like stormed off. I remember just sitting in the window, being so captivated by all of the inspiration.
Yes.
Just passing on the street.
Yes.
I'll never forget that.
It's a goosebump moment.
Yeah, it really is.
And you wanted to have a little autonomy, just even if it was just for those few minutes. I wanted to cross the street, go in that store, sit by myself.
Mm-hmm. And it still like carries with me to this day. I'm somebody who loves being around people, right? We were talking about having really strong groups of people and community, and I have that.
Yes.
When I'm in New York, there's something about being on your own, bouncing through the city, right?
Right.
That's just special.
It's super inspiring. It gets a little bit intense at times, trying to make a phone call today, and it's just Murphy's Law. The minute you get on your cell phone, 100, things happen, and no one can hear you. But, that's New York. You just kind of have to roll with it. I always say people, it's very hard to be lonely in New York, because even if you're alone, you just walk out on the street and you feel like you have all these compadres. Even though no one's really paying attention to you, at least you feel like there's this energy that just kind of swirls around you and gets you excited about life.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really special place.
Yeah.
It's not for everyone. You get people who say like, oh, I could never live in New York. It's too much of a party town. I've never seen it as a party town. I'm a pretty mild-mannered person. I'm a, severe workaholic, and I like to, work at my craft, but I have a simple life, and I have a quiet life. You don't have to, I'm not clubbing every night.
Yeah, right.
Way people think.
But you did spend 40 years with GQ, and I imagine there was a party or two involved in there. Is there what's like the craziest party that stands out to you?
Probably even before GQ, when, I had these friends. So I went to school for a couple of years on the Upper East Side. I was dedicated to my school, and, I wanted to go to a fashion school, but I didn't want to be a designer, so I didn't go to Parsons. I didn't go to Pratt. I didn't want to be a retailer. I wanted to work for a magazine. So I found this very small school that had a high job placement in publishing, especially Condé Nast and Hearst Publishing. And I decided that I would apply. I got myself into the school, and it was a pretty intense study program, and I made it more intense on myself because I knew so little about fashion. I was kind of I'm not I wasn't fresh off the farm, but I was fresh off of, the suburbs of St. Paul, which is, I didn't know a lot about the industry. I had the will and the desire to make it in New York. I think that's why we're here, because we want to make something of ourselves. And so I had these friends that, Studio 54, I moved to New York in the summer of 79. So there's three pivotal things that happened in the summer of 79. The Son of Sam was caught, but he was loose at the time. The big New York City blackout, the first really legendary one, and the opening of Studio 54. So Studio 54 was a huge inspiration to me and a very hard place to get in, but I had friends that were, I'll just say it, they were modelistic, good looking, and the doorman liked that, and they would come over and close my books and say, put on a look, we're going to Studio 54. So those are really fun times. I'm a little bit more of a voyeur. I wasn't necessarily partaking in everything, but I loved kind of cruising around the bar area where there was this wraparound couch with where all the famous people would sit. So for me, it was really thrilling to see, Halston sitting next to Liza Minnelli, sitting next to Elizabeth Taylor, sitting next to Jackie O, sitting next to, on and on and on. So I found that to be incredibly inspiring. And for someone who wanted the experience of New York, the way I saw it in the movies in the 70s, it's like I was kind of sitting in the middle of it, right? So I lived in this little, I lived at the Y. I lived at the Y for a year. The 92nd Street Y,
Like the YMCA?
the YMHA. So was the Young Men's Hebrew Association. So my father had a friend who was Jewish and said Jim has to stay at the YMHA because the first thing he needs to do is immerse himself in Jewish culture, because that's what New York is all about. Best advice I ever got. And I stayed there. It was myself and one other Gentile and then like 90 Jewish podiatry students. And they were all amazing. And they all took me under their wing and took me to their homes. Not all 90, but it's like there's certain ones that were like, okay, you're coming home. This is, it's Yom Kippur, it's Rosh Hashanah, it's all these holidays. And I had no idea of any of that, growing up in the Midwest. And it was a great entree into New York culture. So I lived there, which was kind of a dormitory kind of situation for 10 months. And then I moved in with a friend of mine in a small studio apartment. So it was during that time in that studio apartment that we were going to Studio 54. Super inspiring.
Did you watch the documentary?
I did.
Was it pretty accurate?
I thought that was good. I thought the Halston documentary was actually even better because I think it touched on a lot of those times and the ups and downs of it. I think in those days it was just the height of glamour, and sophistication. People dressed up to go to the club and people, danced all night. But there was just something about the culture of New York then. It was everybody wanted to ride on that coattail. Everybody wanted to be in that crowd. And, I was a young buck in the fashion, world, still going to school. And I was around all these people looking fabulous and seeing all these celebrities. And it was hyper inspiring for me.
I feel like you've been through so much and seen so much, right? We think about Studio 54. That was hot and exciting for like 3 years.
Yes.
Right? It was so short-lived.
Mm-hmm. Very short-lived. People don't realize that. It kind of like the flame got lit quickly and extinguished.
But what you've been doing is for decades at a very high level.
On my head.
I mean, how many GQ front cover shoots have you been behind?
I think, when I was finally convinced that I should do a book, I was kind of did that book kicking and screaming in the beginning, and then I ended up having a really good time with it because I generally don't like to look back. We started counting the covers, and it's right around 500 covers.
Wow.
Total that I had something to do with. Most of them, all of them I was present on the cover shoot and would have dressed and creative direct the covers. So, I'm super proud of everything I ever did at GQ.
Yeah. The title of your book is wonderful, by the way.
Oh, thanks. It just came to us. I was with the book designer and he said, just throw out some titles so we can kind of, literally bookmark these chapters. And when we got to the 2000s and when GQ really started being a much more of a celebrity driven book, and
rather than like models.
Rather than models. I mean, the model thing kind of changed. That whole thing changed in the mid 80s, but it was usually only the cover that had a celebrity on it. But at this point, you're entering like the 2000s. It's like, well, all the fashion stories should be celebrity, and even the front of the book, if it's just talking about a new designer or something, we should get a cool DJ or a new singer or like a young actor that no one knows. Just to make it more interesting. Like the model thing was always great to look at. They wore the clothes well. This definitely brought up all sorts of complications because now you're shooting guys and girls that are not the perfect model size, which makes it more interesting. But what it did is it really opened the magazine up to a broader scale, made it much more worldly, made it much more filled with many more popular culture touch points. And, it was a great moment. So when that kind of started happening, the whole dynamic really of the magazine changed. And it went from, because it was like models on the cover, And then I remember the day we had a new editor-in-chief. It was 1983, because I was freelance in 79, and then I started full-time in January of 80. And by 1983, Condé Nast bought us in 79. We were owned by Esquire at the time. And we were bought, and we were just kind of like put on this glass coffee table, and we were looked at through a microscope. And what Condé Nast realized is there was great potential for it, that it could be a great men's magazine that all types of men could be interested in, but that maybe it needed a much more experienced editor-in-chief. So Art Cooper was hired, who had a great reputation as a writer and an editor-in-chief. He worked at Penthouse, he worked at Newsweek, he was, a dynamo. So he came in, the first thing he did, was like, we're putting celebrities on the cover. And I remember my first cover shoot with a celebrity was Joe Theismann. You know who Joe Theismann is?
I don't.
Football player. And that would have been November 83.
How do you remember that? Oh my God.
Well, don't you remember every podcast you've ever done or every trip you've ever taken for the most part?
Dates? Heck no. I mean, I remember the story, but I never remember dates.
But I have visual references, right? So I can picture, you have to remember from the age of 20 years old on, I was at a magazine that really shaped who I became as an adult. So this magazine, required a certain love of deadlines and, a love of the circus of, fashion and journalism and, not only dogged reporting and all of that, but being topical and, racing to the deadline. So a lot of people don't realize that every 3.5 weeks you're putting out a magazine that has to go to print. At some point you have to let go of it, right? So that is something that I grew up with, that schedule. I don't think it's necessarily appealing to everyone, because I could never plan a vacation, or, I would know that I could possibly take a week in late August. I could possibly take a week at Christmas, but there was always like, especially when you're working with celebrities, it's like, oh, well, that celebrity's only available, on Tuesday, and it's Thursday the week before. So you're kind of at the mercy of the schedule of getting the magazine out. But I really loved it. I really loved that schedule and, that adrenaline you get from, okay, what am I doing next week? How is that? We're a little bit late on that cover choice. We better make it. And then what's got to happen and all of that. So that makes it really fun. I grew up like that. And, I know a lot of people in the advertising business where they have like 6 months to prepare for an ad campaign. And sometimes we had like 2 days to figure out, how we were going to shoot, LeBron James, where we were going to shoot it, what was the concept, how were we going to get the clothes, all that stuff. So, and I became very used to that kind of schedule, especially after 83, when the celebrities became the important focal point for the covers. And then when Jim Nelson came in after Art Cooper in 2003, that was the moment that Jim was like, well, why don't we make this whole thing much more, why don't we make the experience more special, right? Let's make sure we're very didactic, that we talk about why someone should wear a beautiful striped sweater like that from Todd Snyder, with those cool checkerboard socks, but also we should do great photography, but we should do it like on an upcoming celebrity, so we can give a little bit of a pop culture buzz to the whole thing. So he was the one who kind of ushered in like celebrities for everything, and celebrities meaning can be athletes, musicians, actors, all of that. So then the whole machine of the magazine became, that became a very important force. And it was no longer, just grab some sample size clothes and put them on people. I mean, it was never that easy, but now it was a little bit more complicated, because you needed to do a proper storyboard, and you needed to, speak with the publicist and the actor and get them involved and create a part for them and find the right photographer. And, but that's what made us tick. That's what makes me tick.
Well, that's why you took 2 sick days in 4 years.
2 sick days.
So out of the 500 cover shoots, which is insane, That's just so many people. There's so many lessons in those 500, I would imagine. What's your top 5?
Oh, top 5. Obama, for sure. Going to the White House twice. Well, going to his office. He was a senator, so as an incoming president, in his office at the U.S. Senate, at the beginning of his tenure before he gets inaugurated, and then in his last year in office in the White House. So both of those experiences were quite legendary. And even to see something like, I mean, the charisma was exactly the same. The swagger was even better, towards 8 years later, and it was, it was a pinch me moment. You're shooting the president of the United States and you're,
From St. Paul, Minnesota.
And, I don't care who I'm shooting. If I don't like what they're wearing, I'm going to say something. So that's the one person that you can't really dress because they need to wear their own clothes. They're not there. They're not there to endorse anything. And, you can't show up with a bunch of clothes and do a fitting with them or whatever. And you'd only have probably, 11 minutes with them.
No 9-hour fittings.
No 9-hour fittings. So the first time I shot him, they let me see what he was wearing on the Senate floor because his assistant had a little closed circuit TV. And it was exactly the opposite of what I had asked him to wear, which is a dark suit and a white shirt and a dark tie. And he was wearing a blue suit that I don't think fit him very well, and a blue shirt and an orange tie. And the guy is so handsome and has got a great physique, and he was wearing a suit that was too big for him and all the colors that I thought were wrong for the cover. So she's like, I'll let him know.
Mr. President?
Yeah.
Jim Moore?
Not president yet.
Okay.
Mr. Senator, we would like, a dark suit. And I mean, in my defense, I had asked for the dark suit, but of course, Murphy's Law, he wasn't wearing it. So he showed up and he's like, his first words were like, someone in this room doesn't like what I as a joke. He's like, I'm happy to change. And he brought a little selection of things. And then I worked it out what he was going to wear. And then, he looked awesome. And then the second time I shot him, when I shook his hand, I said, Mr. President, do you remember, meeting me the last time, that we did the cover? And he said, yes, I do. And I remember you not liking my suit. And by the way you're looking at my tie, I can tell you don't like my tie either. And I was like, could be a little bit darker, And he's like, okay, I gotcha. I'll go home and get some ties for you. So we were at the White House, so he was home. So he ran upstairs and got some ties. And I don't know. It's one of those great moments.
And so I've trusted you because you were honest with him.
Yeah. And, I think I've always had that, my mission is always to bring back the best cover, right? So I always saw the cover as, there was a point in time for many decades up until recently where the covers were very important. The covers sold the magazine and your newsstand sales were really, really important. So my mission was always to make sure that cover was the best it could be. And I always see covers, or I always saw covers as posters. Posters were, those things that, live on forever and they really stand out at the newsstand. And I remember once I said to Jim Nelson when he first came in office as editor-in-chief of GQ in 2003, I was like, what is your goal for the cover? Because traditionally editor-in-chiefs don't go on cover shoots. So I'm the one kind of, bearing all the responsibility. And he's like, I just want them to be engaged and I want the readers to look at that image and that person should look like they want to be on the cover, And that was just parallel to what I had always, my philosophy always was GQ is, I don't like sad pictures. Someone doesn't have to be laughing, but it's like there has to be hopefulness and engagement, in their expression. So I think, so then I become a little bit of a barracuda when it comes to, what they're going to wear. And especially if I'm put in a position where I can't actually bring the clothes that I see them in. So I'm definitely not going to keep my mouth shut, even though it's the President of the United States. And he was just the the best.
That's wonderful.
About it.
Okay, who else?
I mean, that's really hard.
You can't do top 5?
Top 5. Well, another one comes to mind. Tom Cruise and Dustin Hoffman for Rain Man. So Rain Man, do you know that movie?
Yeah.
100 years ago. And we shot them for the cover together because they had equal billing in that movie. That movie was a huge success. I put them both in tuxedos, and Herb Ritz, the late great Herb Ritz, shot the cover. And it was just one of those great moments. And I've never been a fanboy. I don't get nervous around celebrities. It's just, I'm very driven. I know what I want for the cover to be. But I do remember there's that moment I'm tying Tom Cruise's tie. And so Rain Man means that he still is at the peak of his celebrity and his performance. But in those days, it was like, he already had Top Gun. He had obviously Risky Business. He had Mission Impossible. It's like, this is like the biggest star on earth, right? I'm tying his tie, and I'm like, I better not forget how to tie this bow tie. So I remember that moment. But also on top of those great memories, I just really love the cover. I love the way the cover looked. Another cover I really loved was something I did just I think it was 2019, 2018. LeBron James on the cover. We did him for a Man of the Year cover, and we did him as the king, and we had this like gold thorn of crowns made for him, and inside everything was kind of regal but modern looking. We had this amazing photographer named Pari Dukovic do the pictures, and I love working with NBA players, especially someone like LeBron, because they're so excited about the clothes. And for me, it's about the clothes, right? I mean, that's just my niche. So I'm a sports dummy, so I'm not necessarily going to be talking to him about the game last night, but he is going to want to talk to me about, the latest fashion. So I had this big kind of burgundy Alexander McQueen coat, and he just fell in love with it. And I was like, I'm glad you did, because that's kind of the cornerstone of the whole shoot, with the gold buttons, and we're kind of playing off the fact that you're, King James. And he was like, let's do it. I mean, so, ready and willing and wanting to collaborate. And, NBA players are probably the most fun to shoot because they love fashion. And there's that intersection of fashion and sports that really comes alive when you're shooting someone like that. And they enjoy the preparation. If there's 10 racks of clothes in the room, they want to try everything on. And I love that. That's a huge gift.
What do you think makes a good outfit?
Really good question. What makes a good outfit? Good outfit.
My sister told me to ask that, by the way.
Okay. It all depends. People say, fashion's subjective. I agree with that to a certain extent, but at the end of the day, I'm an image maker, so my job was always to make the guy on the cover for that moment in time look the best they possibly could, right? And I do have this idea or this ideal of someone looking timeless in a way. Like I do love that a lot of the covers I did, a lot of the fashion shows I did still hold up, and that was actually the only way I would do the book, because if I could, get that point across, So I do love things that are modern. I'm not a very nostalgic person, so I'm never going to be the guy like, rifling through the bins at the vintage store. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I do, I respect designers like Ralph Lauren who love that vintage feel, but I think he's such an amazing talent because he knows how to make it Ralph Lauren, and those clothes are flawless. But I think, when I first, get the assignment, I'm like, oh, you're going to shoot Ryan Gosling, or you're going to shoot, whomever. I get it. I instantly get, it's just an instinctual thing. I get a visual in my mind of how they should look. And then I just kind of attack and I go after it. So I think it's instinctual, and a lot of it's based on, can be slightly influenced by the project that they're working on, like the movie that's coming out or whatever. Could be partly influenced by the fact that maybe I shot that person 2 years ago and put them in something casual, so maybe now I want to dress them up. But I would say that most of the times, if you put a guy in something a little bit more tailored, it doesn't have to be a suit, but it should be something that has a little bit more tailored. That's going to get the more eyeballs. That's going to be the thing that people are going to remember. You know,
Find a good tailor.
Yeah, it's like you know, it's kind of a proven thing where if you put a little extra effort into your outfit, if you wear, you know, even if you're wearing a sport coat or a suit with a t-shirt, you're going to get more compliments because you're wearing a tailored piece. And if you're just wearing like, you know, something that's, and tailored can be soft. It doesn't have to be structured, but I think it's just spending a little bit more time to, dress yourself up rather than dress yourself down.
Yeah. I feel like you probably walk to the side everywhere you go. Are you just constantly like looking people up and down, just like kind of trying to draw inspiration and
I'm
enjoy it?
inspired. I'm super inspired by New York, and that's why I couldn't really do what I do and live anywhere else. And now I'm a freelance creative director, so I could possibly live other places, but I have no desire because the city is so inspiring. And I said this before, it's a quote I've said before, but I could be at the fashion shows for 3 weeks and then come back in New York in my first 10 minutes, be more inspired by what I saw in the streets.
So true.
Because, you know, I love seeing the runway shows and I remember everything I love there, but then it's the little twist of how it's worn in the real world that really excites me. So I will always be a fan of the mix, right? So I always think something dressy needs something sporty. I think something that's refined needs something that's a little bit roughed up. So I think those two opposing forces make fashion more interesting.
I love that.
Like I got in trouble once because I put a hoodie under a suit with a pair of sneakers back in the 80s. Now that doesn't seem revolutionary today.
It's so cool now.
But my editor-in-chief was like, what the F are you doing? This is going to put us under. And I was like, no, I'm feeling this. I'm feeling like this sporty mixed with tailored thing.
Did you guys publish it?
Yeah, we did.
Bravo.
Yeah.
That makes me proud. I can think back to a moment where I was literally, it was like a nighttime, like prayer kind of thing, you know? And I was like, I just want to become more creative. I feel like I wasn't creative at all.
Yes.
You know? And it was just this manifestation. And then within 18 months to 2 years, all of a sudden I was sitting in recording studios, seeing songs come to life. And I had friends who were painters and I randomly started a podcast.
Yes.
And so it just, for some reason, happened through manifestation.
You enjoy being around creative people.
I love it.
And you're creative yourself.
I would say now, yes.
Yes.
It's almost hard for me to say yes to that, right? But the fact that I get to sit here with you right now and produce this,
yes,
you know, makes me think, yeah, I am creative.
You are.
Thank you.
You're curious, which is really important. You can't have curiosity. You can't be creative and not be curious.
Oh, thank you. Yes. What else do you think you need to be creative?
I think what creative people suffer from the most is too many ideas. And I think it's important that you go with your first idea. And I think it's important that you don't look back and you just kind of do it. You know, I think so many people suffer from not doing it, you know, and it's like, what have you got to lose if you just say like, oh, I have this idea. I want to put someone in a red suit and green shoes or whatever. I mean, I haven't done that, but you know, it's just like, if you have this idea, then you should just explore it and you should do it because there's some sort of burning something inside of you. If you're confident, you know that you have it. Even if you don't know if you have it, it's usually those instincts that are going to point you in the right direction.
Okay. So just go for it.
Just go for it.
That's good.
If you have an idea, then go for it. You created this podcast from nothing.
I was at a board meeting for that nonprofit I was telling you about,
yes.
And I felt like it was the most interesting room that I'd been in my life. So I literally grabbed my phone, pulled one of the people out who works for Bill Gates on his venture capital side, has lived in Pakistan and Africa and all these places. I was like, come to the hallway. We're doing an interview.
That's amazing.
And she's like, no, we're not doing it. I'm like, she didn't want to do video. And I was like, we're doing video.
I'm familiar.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Of course.
Yep. I'm curious if there's anybody that you haven't gotten to work with yet that you really want to. I mean, all that's left, I feel like at this point is like Jesus Christ and Abraham Lincoln for you.
No. Listen, I think the list is endless. I think there's a lot of, I would love to work with Bad Bunny. I would love to work with Timothy Chalamet. I would love to work with, who haven't I? Yeah, it's hard to come up with a lot of people I haven't worked with, but it's like it's more kind of a new generation situation.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what I really enjoy is the exploration of, a young buck like a rookie tennis player or NBA player, or NFL player, or a new actor on the scene, and kind of like helping them, mold their own personal style, and maybe putting them in something they wouldn't have thought to be put in, and kind of trying to elevate their image in that way. So I'm always up for a challenge, not necessarily I know people talk about the power of no. I'm kind of like the person that says this power of yes. I'll usually be up for any challenge within reason.
I love that.
If it's a stylistic challenge and it's effective, it's a chance to take someone and help them with their personal style, or help create an image for them.
Mm-hmm. All right, Bad Bunny, Jim Moore's coming for you.
I think he's doing everything right. I think he's experimenting. I probably saw him in that new Gucci campaign, which I think is so good with Kendall, and he's almost like the most classic we've ever seen him, Then we saw him at the Met, which is like modern, but a little avant-garde. And he's just he can kind of float from style genre to style genre and look super cool. So a lot of respect for him.
Yeah. The power of yes.
Yes.
Why'd you say yes to doing this podcast?
Because you have enthusiasm, and I believed you from the minute I met you that there was a motivational force behind you, and that you were a genuine force. Now I could have walked in here and this could have been like, I don't know what, not the setup I had expected, but I didn't really expect that. I thought we had a really nice conversation at the Todd Snyder store that day when you bought the sweater that you have on. And hopefully I convinced you to buy it. And
you totally
look good in it.
Thank you.
And I don't know, just again, instincts,
Mm-hmm.
And I think that more people should be that way,
Mm-hmm.
But I think you have something special about you, and I could see that.
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah,
that means a lot. That was a special day. It's funny. I don't know if you've heard it through my lens. I was walking down the sidewalk and going to Todd Snyder.
Yeah.
And my first time ever going to the store.
Right.
And being from Iowa myself, and Todd being from Iowa, and now being this huge clothing sensational, right, based out of New York.
Right.
I've idolized him a lot. And always really wanted to meet him. And so I was like, well, what better way than to start by going to the store in Tribeca?
That's fun.
And so I'm walking from the apartment over to the store, and I see this group of people on the sidewalk. And I could just feel that this group was kind of a force of nature, right? Like instincts.
Okay.
Something.
Yes.
And so I see it, I'm like, man, I wish I could talk to them because I bet they're interesting. And I'm like, I'll just leave them alone, right?
Right.
The waitress was running at this crew from the restaurant, and I don't know, something was going on.
You were shooting the salespeople at the store. Yeah.
So I walk into the store. I'm holding this sweater that I'm wearing right now up. I'm looking at it. I'm like, this thing is so cool. And then somebody walks in behind, and I look back, and it's the big crew of people from the sidewalk. And I'm like, God, you are so good. And you're last to walk in.
Yeah.
And you chirped, and you're like, that sweater is amazing.
Yeah.
And I think I fired back at you. And I'm like, well, try it on with me.
Right. You did.
Yep.
No, you're super friendly. Like, definitely like hit the mark there. That was an interesting day because, for me, it's like I really try to look out for the real guy. That's my guy. That's who we did the magazine for, and that's also the person that I really try to look out for. So when Todd had, I do all his catalogs, I sell all his fashion shows, I do anything that is, any styling for him at all. So, but when he has these kind of more niche, more smaller, maybe they're just video content, not just, but they're video content, and maybe it's going to go into an email. It's like, I really want to show, and I think this came up in a conversation, we want to show the difference between the three fits of jeans, because sometimes on models, you don't get it because, they have these kind of perfect, physiques, and sometimes you can't tell the difference between the three cuts. So it's like, well, let's actually go to the store and talk to three guys that wear one guy loves a skinny jean, one loves the slim, and one loves a wider leg. So I love stuff like that because it talks directly to real guys and gives them hope that they can wear cool clothes or they can find their own style. I think the most intimidating thing about fashion for men is that men see, they can look at the runway shows, they can see, the onslaught of fashion that's out there, and it's super exciting to them, but it's super confusing because they're like, am I supposed to look like this? I'm supposed to look like that? I'm supposed to wear baggy pants? Am I supposed to wear skinny suit? Is that over? Am I supposed to, I think it's a conundrum, maybe not someone like you who's naturally stylish and, has a vibe for it all, but it's like the average guy who is interested in style needs a little hand holding, and needs to kind of like, yeah, this is why you haven't found the right pair of jeans because you haven't looked in the right place, or maybe you need something a little bit slimmer because maybe if you're not the perfect model size, you think you have to wear clothes that are a little bit big for you, but it's actually just the opposite. So I love my whole point is I love the teaching part of it, not the preaching, but just teaching and trying to like guide men along. And it's proven when you can kind of steer guys in the right direction, they wear something, they get a compliment on it, it gives them instant confidence. So that's the lane that it really excites me. That's what we were doing that day.
You make it so approachable, right? And what you and Todd are doing, I think is really powerful and very approachable. So thank you for that.
You can really thank him mostly because he is an incredible designer. He is got his finger on the pulse, but he does really look out for that guy. And that's a lot of the conversations that we had even today is about, how can we,
you and Todd?
Yeah. How can we talk even, more directly to that guy, to that consumer and ease him into a different silhouette or get him in pleated pants or whatever. And I think that was a lot of the impetus for him for building all the stores. Less than 2 years, he has 16 stores across the United States. And that was his online business is huge, but the fact that, a guy, maybe somewhere near a guy's hometown, there's a Todd Snyder store now that he can go in and kind of, have some fun in the dressing room and figure out, and not be so intimidated by some of the new silhouettes that are out there. And Todd's really good about that.
I wonder if he ever goes back to Iowa.
I think he does.
Does he?
And actually, there are probably 7 or 8 employees that are from Iowa.
I love that.
He is really big on recruiting a lot of his staff from Iowa, especially in the design and merchandising areas. He brings them from schools in Iowa. A lot of times they come in as interns and then they turn into full-time people.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I'd miss us Midwesterners,
Yes, we've got to stick together, right?
And we are.
He's from Iowa, I'm from Minnesota, so it's all right there.
Yeah.
And you're from Iowa.
Yeah, exactly. Out of all of these mega famous people that you've hung out with, and I love that you don't get starstruck, it's probably why you've gotten to meet so many of them and promote them. And those people who've gotten lucky enough to work with you, I'm curious what you see as kind of the common traits amongst them. Right? Because we always look at these famous people and we think, oh my gosh, right? This and that. And I just wonder how much of that is true and what is the reality that you see amongst them?
I think, selfishly, I needed to figure out how to get to a place with these people that some consider untouchable, some consider very guarded, some of them do have a lot of guard dogs around them. How do I get them to a place where I can, dress them, they can feel comfortable, they can feel that it's a collaborative experience. So I came up with this idea of the fitting. And the fitting was something that became really important. And there was a point at GQ very early on where the policy was no fit, no shoot. So you had to come to a fitting. And if you were in New York, you usually came to the GQ fashion closet. Most people had no problem with that. If we were on location, I would come to their hotel or whatever. And this was usually done the day before the shoot. And what it did is, there's no photographers. It's just myself and an assistant and the celebrity. Maybe the publicist is there, but it's a chance for them to kind of let their guard down and for you to kind of explain how you see the shoot and explain everything to them. Of course, you've given them a little bit of a draft ahead of time, but this is the moment when you have them all to yourself, so you can really start putting clothes on them and have them standing in front of a mirror and feel good about the character they're going to play. So actors as a whole are probably actors because it's their craft. They probably feel more comfortable playing someone else than themselves, right? So that I would say they're not always the most comfortable people in front of the still camera, right? But if you give them a role to play, if you say, oh, we're going to make you a detective, or we're going to make you an artist, or we're going to do, whatever, you're going to be a tourist in Amsterdam or whatever it is, then they get into it, right? Because then they feel they're being directed. So then if the clothes reflect that and you bring all those elements together in the fitting, your shoot's going to be most likely very successful, because the actor is going to come in, first of all, the timing to get the clothes tailored and to fit them is crucial. So you need to have that day before. And back to the point where not everybody is a sample size. And then by the time they get to the shoot, they walk into the shoot and they are completely, they know what they're getting into. They're not going to, there's not got to be any defensiveness. The publicist signed on for it. Everyone signed off on it. And you can spend the whole day doing pictures. So the fit became very, very important. And I think a lot of people saw the fitting, people would say like, oh, the fitting, it's like so much time because you got to put the clothes together, which is the day before the fitting. Then you got to do the fitting and then you have to do the shoot. I said, well, it's like anything. If you don't put the preparation into it, how can it turn out? I call it the Martha Stewart, formula. Like, she does all the preparation before she throws everything in the bowl so she can make the perfect souffle, right? So you have to kind of go through that. But more importantly, the fitting is for me to really relate to the subject, whether it be a athlete or an actor or whoever it might be, and for us to make them feel really good about what they're wearing, make them part of the collaboration, and also get those clothes fit with a tailor.
Did you have a process for connecting with them?
It kind of depended who it was. It depended on who it was. It depended on how much time you had.
All right, let's say it's Michael Jordan. What's your process when you first shake Michael Jordan's hand?
Well, Michael Jordan is a little bit of a different situation because that was in the 80s, and that's when we probably brought one or two suits on the shoot. And that was and it wasn't like racks of clothes or whatever. But to connect with him would be to tell him that I had this suit made, kind of based on a suit that I had seen in a picture. It wasn't made by his guy, but for him to try it on, we had all the specs, and he really liked it, and he got to keep the suit, and he wore it many times after that.
Oh, that's cool.
I think every situation is a teeny bit different. I remember the first time I shot with Justin Timberlake, and we were doing this big shoot with Bruce Weber, and we were doing it out in Montauk, and tons of clothes, and I wanted to do him as this kind of Irish guy, and we were doing it in Montauk on this beach with these cliffs and this old house, and it's supposed to be kind of like, Irish, Scottish, like lots of tweeds, and Bruce and I had come up with this whole idea. So I had done a fitting. I had done what's called a run through on a model. We always found a model that looked like the actor for the most part, or the celebrity, the athlete, or whatever. And then we would do the looks and take Polaroids of it. The back of the days with Polaroids, or on our iPhone. And then I would show it to him. And when he came in, not knowing a lot about him, not knowing if he's finicky, not knowing if he's being collaborative, not knowing if he has 10 minutes or 3 hours or whatever. And I walked in and he looked at all the Polaroids, and he's like, hey man, you don't have to show me this. You know what you're doing. Just tell me what to wear, So that's kind of like a dream, right? Because then we can just like throw stuff on him. Go. And, and I know it's going to look great on him, and he feels good on it, and he's looking in front of the mirror. There are other situations where you might have to explain it a little bit more. I remember doing my fitting with Jay-Z, who was just a doll, but it's like, I knew with him, he's like, set it up for me. Like, who am I, in these pictures, and I was like, well, you're CEO walking off your private jet, you're wearing a striped suit, and he's just like, he's digging it. He's getting it. I'm painting this visual for him. And so for each person, it's a little bit different. It's a different experience for each person.
But the fact that they're entrusting you to lead, right, and just giving you that control, it's a very vulnerable relationship.
It is. It's the power of the magazine too. I mean, a lot of times when the guys came into the GQ fashion closet, they were really excited to be there, and to be dressed by the magazine. And I think there was a respect level. And I think to get the cover of the magazine or to get fashion pages in the magazine, is a trophy to a lot of them. And they were ready and willing players. So I tried to make the experience pleasant, and I tried to be firm where I needed to be. And if I felt like they were going to look good in something, I'm going to push as much as I can to get them in it. And 9 times out of 10, they would love it. And I remember shooting once with Denzel Washington, and we were fitting him in New Orleans. He was on the set of a movie, and we were shooting him down there. And he said, I don't want any of these. The clothes look beautiful, but do me a favor, Jim. I don't want any of the slim pants. This was the height of like the skinny suit, right? He's like, I need a flowy pant. I don't like slim pants. I was like, I got you. Don't worry about it. So, and I had this great tailor who I love to this day. Her name is Melissa. And we put the first suit on, was an Armani suit. It looked great on him, but the pant was just too wide. And I said, just humor me for a second. Let me just, Melissa, just let's take in the leg a little bit. And I said, and I want you to look at that leg and how much better it looks on you, how slim it is and how it's tapered and it has a little, and he looks at it and he's like, taper all the legs, So it's just kind of truth in advertising. You have to, if you believe in something, chances are the person that you're working with will believe in it also.
Push a little bit.
That's important. And you have to be a little bit pushy. And
like me emailing you 25 times.
Western doesn't hurt. Maybe it does. I don't know. But, every situation is different. You really don't know what you're getting into sometimes. And sometimes the people that you shoot, 4, 5, and 6 times over the years, I did 7 covers with, Tom Cruise at different stages in his life. Sometimes he was very consistent, but, I can name other actors, which I won't name, that, they go through different phases. The first time you work with them, they're like, they can't believe they're getting the cover and they're really young. The second time, maybe they're a little bit cockier. But the third time, they're like, they've established themselves and they're just like, great. And then the last time you shoot them, they're like, this is so cool that you guys called me again. So you get to see them at these various pillars of their career. And you start to realize that people are really good at what they do, not only because of their talent, but because of what, good and gracious people they are. I don't think I could count the rotten apples on more than 2 or 3 fingers that I've had to deal with in 40 years.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Did you think your life would turn out this way?
Yes.
You envisioned it. Just kidding. It's like, wow, good for you. You manifested it,
I set out to do something. I think the day my life changed,
the
gumption, right? I wanted to work at one of the Condé Nast magazines. I think the day my, I was in the right place at the right time. I think luck is a lot of it. I didn't have a lot of experience, but there was a little index card that says internship at GQ on my school's bulletin board. And I ripped that thing off the bulletin board so fast that pin went flying like a bullet through the air. And I ran to GQ and got an internship, and that's kind of how it all started. So I was really blessed to have that opportunity, and I wasn't going to disappoint anyone. I was in that closet for the first, in the fashion closet for the first, at least 6-9 months, just straightening the clothes and putting the socks by color and, packing the trunks for the editors and making, going on the shoots and making sure like everything is ironed and pressed and doing all that assistant stuff. That I was lucky I didn't assist for a long time because the Condé Nast had bought the magazine. They were starting to kind of grow it. So I was able to move up quite quickly, but I'm still the person to this day that's, teaching assistants how to iron or lacing the shoes, or I'm hands-on, I don't necessarily know how other stylists work or how other fashion designers work, but I like to, fix the clothes myself. I like to have the interaction with the people. I like to think there's a certain vulnerability that people have when they're standing in front of a camera. So anything I can do to make them feel good about themselves or make them look better. I also, if I see something I don't like, I will change it. And I think that's, once you have something on film or on digital, you can't change it, so take that opportunity to, oh, I wish that was a boot instead of shoe. Do it. Don't ever look at a picture that's going to last forever later and say like, oh, I love it all, but I wish I would have changed that shoe. So I think you have to have, that barracuda inside of you that just wants everything to be great. And you have to hopefully do it with a lot of grace and know what you want. And I think if you know what you want and you're decisive, then people around you will respond, and it's important for people to, in my department, to know what their marching orders are and what to do and what the vision is, and also being able to pivot. So I was really lucky to have the best team at GQ, and I have a great team of assistants now that just, they're really in it, and it's like, no is not the answer, and got to make this great.
What would young Jim Moore say about what you've been able to accomplish since you left for New York in 1979? So go back to when you were 18 years old.
Yes.
Right? And now you get to see what you've been able to accomplish since you moved. What would you think about it all?
I would have been, damn, that you did good, It's like, because I feel like every day was filled with honesty and, it's filled with blood, sweat, and tears, but that's kind of what was fun about it, And I kind of call bull on people that say, fashion isn't glamorous because you're lugging trunks and you're, dealing with all sorts of extraneous activities, because I think it's a very glamorous industry. And that was the thing that drew me to it in the first place, that I love those images, that those images really resonated to me as something that they just called out to me. It was just a lifestyle that I thought was just really beautiful. And whether it was real or fantasy, mostly fantasy, it was a world I didn't have, and it was a world that I really wanted to be a part of. So I would say you did it, kid. You accomplished what you wanted to do, and I don't have any intention of stopping, because now I'm in my chapter 2, and I'm just as excited about clients that I work with now and new gigs that I'm doing. So it's I feel very blessed, and a lot of people helped me. There was a lot of doors that slammed in the beginning, and then someone, answered a letter, and someone opened a door, and I was able to walk through it. So, I think it's so many people to thank, but I think you just have to have that conviction. I sometimes I just want, when I meet young people, I just want them to have vocational goals. I think it's super important, but some people don't realize what they want to do till they're much older, and that's okay too. I always say Frank Lloyd Wright never became famous for anything until he was, well into his 60s. So it can happen at any time. But I feel like being at GQ for 40 years, when I say it, it seems like a long time, but in a way, it was the most fun job, because you imagine how men's ideals changed so much over those decades, and fashion changed so much. And that's what's really fun about this business, especially for someone with a short attention span like me, is like trends change. And in men's wear, they kind of, they're cyclical. So, I'm sure I've shot 200 camel coats. It's just depending on the era, it's big and slouchy, or it's skinny and narrow, or whatever it is, or wearing it with a suit, wearing it casually. But I think that's what's fun about it. The fact that fashion is always changing, and the magazine always had to be fresh and topical and kind of represent what was going on in the culture at this very moment. So that's what I love about the business, even to this day.
Yeah. But you just have such a kind and gracious soul. Seriously, my friend. So
It's very sweet of you to say.
yeah, thank you.
Internalizing everything.
So thank you for taking a chance on me in this podcast.
Of course.
A fellow listener, it's been such an honor to be able to hear this wisdom, and congratulations on everything that you've been able to accomplish.
Thank you. This is an honor for me. And I thank you for calling me out that day and inviting me. This is really fun.
Yeah. You've got a flight to catch to Shanghai, huh?
Yes.
What's happening over there?
I'm doing a photo shoot.
Well, you mentioned part 2 of your career.
Yes.
And you're doing a lot with it. So best of luck. Excited to continue to follow along.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Jim.
Appreciate it, Andrew.
That's it. Thank you so much for tuning in to Permission to Shine, the podcast dedicated to sharing the most humble, inspiring stories that I know you will love. Again, this is Andrew Nemani. I appreciate you tuning in. As always, please reach out. Please follow on Instagram, on YouTube, on LinkedIn, Spotify, Apple. Leave us your thoughts. Let us know who you want as a future guest or what's your takeaways from this conversation. We'll talk to you soon. Have a great, great week.